How's it going, everybody? How we doing?
How's it going? Can you hear me?
It's good. I can hear you well.
All right, awesome.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Super excited to talk with Matt Farr from the Cruise Moab. It's not an organization. It's like an event with the club, right? So you're the committee chair?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we've done the event for 25 years. It'll be our 25th anniversary, and started in the late 90s. And the event is kind of organized and put on by the Rising Sun Four-Wheel Drive Club, Toyota Club in the Denver area, and Wasatch Cruisers is a big part of it as well, out of Salt Lake. So our club's been putting on this event for a quarter of a century at this point.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I'll say it's been an event that's been on my list. The local shop really close to me, Torfab, they've been going down, and I think they've been kind of, besides just enjoying the event, I think they've been sponsoring it to some degree over the last few years. So they always talk about it. There's photos up inside their waiting area in their shop and everything. So it's something that's been on my list. So I'm super excited to kind of talk more and learn more about the event. And I might be trying to request some time off depending on, how much time I have to spread around to all these Land Cruiser events. I'm super excited to kind of explore more. But Matt, tell me a little bit about how you came into the whole Land Cruiser thing. It sounds like you've been with the event for a long time. So walk me through your story of how you found Land Cruisers.
Yeah, I actually found Land Cruisers when I was living in Chicago. I had moved to Chicago in the late 80s. And, at that time, the four-wheel drive options were, there were Jeeps, there were, like the Broncos and Suburbans, Blazers, I think maybe they were still making. Then, the Suzuki Samurai came out. I kind of liked the Suzuki Samurai, but I never bought one. And then I was in a parking garage downtown, and I saw my first FJ40. It was a red FJ40, and this might have been, I don't know, like 94 or something like that. And I was like, that is the coolest vehicle I've ever seen. It's like this Toyota, like all world expedition vehicle. I must find one. And so, of course, back then, really the internet was in its infancy. There, people weren't advertising cars. So I started looking at the Chicago Tribune for, Toyota Land Cruisers, and started showing up, like to see a Toyota Land Cruiser. Like the first one I went to, a guy was selling an FJ60. And I'm like, this isn't what I was looking for. And he's like, oh, you want an FJ40. And, so, I kind of learned as I went. And then eventually in the beginning of 96, I bought an FJ40, a 75 FJ40 from a guy who had moved it up from New Mexico. He bought it down in New Mexico, and took it out on a test drive. And the engine blew on the test drive. It blew a rod through the side of the block on the test drive. And I don't even remember if we just like left it and walked away, or if we managed to limp it back to where he had it parked. I don't think it made it all the way back to where he had it parked. And so I called him up. Like a few weeks later and said, so, I still might be interested in buying it, but obviously it's not running now. And he's like, oh, damn it. He's like, and he had bought that engine and put it in, or had it put in, maybe a year or two before he'd moved up to Chicago. So I bought it. I had met a friend, a guy named Steve, who was with a club called Windy City Land Cruisers. So Windy City Land Cruisers was a Tlca chapter that had started kind of in the mid to early 90s. And so he went and towed my FJ40 with a blown engine back to his place. And then he sourced a block from a guy that he had known that had put a V8 in his FJ40. So he still had just like the block sitting in a shed. So I think I paid $300 for the block, and I paid $1,000 for the FJ40, which these days sounds like an amazing deal. But back then it was kind of a rusty beater, and people were like, "What the hell are you doing?" Because I actually sold. I had like this really nice Honda Accord and I actually sold it because I really didn't have very much money. So I sold my nice Honda Accord to buy this, this non-running FJ40. And then over
I
the
think
course of the next few
everybody
months,
here totally supports that decision. I
yeah,
think
right,
you're in
right,
good
right.
company here.
Yeah. And I was engaged to be married at the time. So, the fact that my wife like stuck with me just shows you like, that we were meant to be together. Um, so and this buddy of mine he was a motorcycle mechanic, but he had every Wednesday off. So I just took off like a whole bunch of Wednesdays in a row, and I would ride the train out to where he lived, and we would work on, prepping the engine. We kind of rebuilt the top end, put the engine in, got everything running. When we first started it up, there was um, like an oil port on the side of the block that had not been sealed up. So we started the engine up, and we're like laughing, and like, by this time we're like 6 beers in, and like oil is like spurting all over the engine bay, and but we were like so happy that we had the thing started. So yeah, I mean, I have wedding pictures with that FJ40. That was a super cool deal. So moved out to Colorado a few years later. Sold that before I left Chicago. Moved out here and bought an 80 series. I bought a 92, maybe it's a 91. Anyway, it was one of the early FJ80s with a 3FE, and I mean, it was unstoppable. But in the mountains, I mean, with the thin air, it just kind of sucks some of the power out of every vehicle, and they're a little underpowered to begin with. I'm sure all the 3FE guys now will send me hate mail, but so it was tough to drive up in the mountains. So I eventually sold that and got another FJ40 as my daily driver. I bought an 81, and I had that for years and years. It was kind of that John Deere green, and within a few years, it kind of obtained the nickname the Hulk because it was mighty and green. And so that's kind of been my handle ever since. So I
Nice.
have, yeah. So then I bought my current rig I bought in '04. It's a 96 FZJ80 black, and the prices in Colorado for 80 series even then were like starting to kind of climb, and so, but like the rest of the country really hadn't figured it out yet. So I found one in the Midwest and bought a one-way plane ticket and drove it back, and I've had it ever since. So when I got it, it was stock, had like, I don't know, like 70,000 miles on it, and now it's like 225 or something like that, and 4-inch slee lift, sliders, ARB front bumper, winch, back bumper, drawers, ARB fridge, ham radio, supercharged with a TRC supercharger, tons of armor underneath, an Iron Pig off-road skid plate that you literally can balance the truck on. I mean, it's like the chunkiest thing you've ever seen in your life. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty good rig, and I've taken that one all over. So I'd like to get another FJ40, but oh my gosh, it's kind of hard to afford them these days. So you either need to buy something that's just beat to hell, or really save your nickels to be able to afford something good. Yeah.
That's how I got into this one. I honestly I got into a 60 series probably 12 years ago. It was right after the wave of cash for clunkers kind of went through and kind of probably decimated a lot of the Land Cruisers. Yeah, so I picked that one up, and I never thought I'd get into a 40 series until a couple of years ago. Somebody was selling one without a title on OfferUp, and I think 3 or 4 of us from like our little Seattle group of Land Cruiser friends were all like, we should check this out. So we dropped down there, and $2,000 later, and we towed this thing home, and it's still need to work on getting everything put back together. I got floor pans I need to weld in. But yeah, that's the only way I was figuring I'd be able to get into one too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. You managed to find one for $2,000, and I mean, yeah, you could do all the work. You just, it just takes time.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean,
There's
it
never
takes
enough
time and
time.
money, but at least you don't have to come up with all the money all at once. That seems to be the thing for me.
I would agree. Well, sweet, man. So how did you get the Land Cruiser, and then you got connected with the Rising Sun?
Yeah, Rising Sun is like the Front Range Denver metro area four-wheel drive club for Toyotas. There's another couple of Toyota clubs, maybe three more in Colorado. There's one down in Colorado Springs, the Colorado Land Cruisers. There's one up northern Colorado and into Wyoming called Horsetooth. And I know a bunch of folks from Horsetooth. That's a really good group. And not that Colorado Land Cruisers is not. I just know more people from Horsetooth. And then there's out in the western slope in the Grand Junction area, there's Book Cliff Cruisers, and they're a really good club too. So, so Rising Sun has been a club in Colorado since 1981. It's an old club, and the story goes that there were a bunch of guys with FJ40s, and they used to go wheeling with all their Jeep buddies, and they just got kind of tired of kind of the constant getting razzed, stupid rice burner, and they just, I mean, the reputation of Japanese stuff in, the late 70s, early 80s was not what it is now, where everybody thinks made in Japan means that it's probably like made of gold. Back then, people would think, made in Japan meant it was junk. And so they got a lot of grief for that. And so they decided to form their own club. And kind of as a big middle finger, they named it the Rising Sun, which is of course the name of the flag of Japan during World War II. So it was just as much in your face as it possibly could be. So I joined Rising Sun in 2000. So I've been in the club for 22 years or so, and then I went to my first Cruise Moab in 2001, and that was the fourth annual event. And so I went out there with my FJ40, I drove it all the way to Moab, and ran some trails and just kind of fell in love with Moab and, had a great time. Before when I had an FJ40 in the Midwest, we'd gone up to Wisconsin and, wheeled it around a little bit on some sand hills and stuff. And it was, through some forest trails, and it really wasn't hardcore stuff. I mean, it was fun, but it wasn't kind of hardcore stuff. And then got into Moab, and it was like a whole nother environment, where you're doing stuff that, is challenging, and, you really actually need to engage low range and four-wheel drive and lock in your hubs and all that stuff. So, so then I joined the committee for the 2003 event, and I've been involved with kind of the organization and putting on of Cruise Moab, pretty much ever since. There's a few years I've taken off, but this is my fifth year as the chairman of the event. And this will be our 25th annual Cruise Moab now, but it will actually be the 24th event taking place because we had to cancel the event in 2020 because it was it was a month after COVID kind of hit everybody. If you remember, that was mid-March when it hit, and our event was going to be mid-April, and I mean, it just everything was getting canceled, and so we reluctantly had to cancel our event, and that was a tough decision. So then last year, 2021, we did have the event, but we had kind of a Cruise Moab light. So Cruise Moab, it's not just wheeling trails. We also have a big vendor showcase night. We have a big dinner, a group dinner on Friday night with a big raffle. Our sponsors all generously donate these great prizes, and usually we'll buy a few as well. And the registrants, get an opportunity to win some, really choice stuff, and so we canceled anything that was like a group gathering. So we canceled the vendor showcase, we canceled the dinner, we canceled the raffle. So we just ran trails, and which was a great time. I mean, it's always a great time, right? But this year we're going to be back, all the way. We're going to have the vendor showcase night. We've already got a ton of vendors who've committed to coming. We're going to have the dinner and the raffle. I think we're having a food truck come down from Salt Lake City that is actually going to make barbecue on the site. And we'll have beef brisket, pulled pork, chicken. I think those are the options. So it should be pretty good. So we're excited to, finally kind of be back to normal. The last time we had a normal event was 2019. That was a big one. 2020 was going to be our biggest ever. And then we had to cancel it. So we think, this year will maybe be the biggest ever, the biggest and best ever.
Sometimes it's nice to take a step back to really appreciate, everything. And I think last year for a lot of people was one of those things where you can really, get a better understanding of what you truly appreciate. So Yeah, I have a little chirp from a smoke alarm battery that's cold, so I'm sorry for that. Somebody's commenting on that right now, so my bad. Um, but I was curious, how did the event come about in the first place? I mean, it's been long running. It sounds like it's been. Has it been with the club the whole time? Was it just a club thing, and then it kind of became a TLCA thing?
So I think it was meant to be a TLCA event from the start. So Rising Sun had become a TLCA chapter in I think like 1994, and so some of our guys from the club at that time were reasonably involved in TLCA, the Toyota Land Cruiser Association, which has existed since 1976. And somebody made the remark, because Rubathon had been going out on the Rubicon Trail for decades, and there were a few other events. The G Smitter, the Great Smoky Mountain Trail Ride, was a big one in the mid '90s. That used to be down at Tlca, and they've moved that one since, but it's still going. Because I remember hearing about that one like right after I bought my Land Cruiser. Guys were like, "Are you going to go down to G Smitter?" And I was like, this thing won't even go like a block down the street yet, so I may have to wait on that. But so somebody suggested, like, we should have an event in Moab. There's Easter Jeep Safari. There should be like a Toyota event out there. And so some guys from the Rising Sun, since they were close by, kind of raised their hand and said, "Yeah, we'll go check it out." So in '97, they put a group of guys together, and they went out there to do an unofficial run, to just kind of try it out and that sort of thing. And they got out there and they realized that none of them knew any of the trails, and they were camped at the Slick Rock Campground on the north end of Moab. And there was a guy there, an older guy, with a red FJ40 with the license plate, Colorado license plate, said Red Fox. And he was out there with some of his Jeep buddies. And so they walked over and started talking to him. And his name was Dave Brown, and he knew all the trails. So Dave kind of agreed to take these guys out and show them the trails in Moab. And so, of course, they became fast friends. And then Dave joined the Rising Sun and was a big part of putting on Cruise Moab, for the official first annual event, which was in 1998. Dave, as recently as 2019, was out at the event. I think Dave's 82 this year, so he would have been 79 in 2019, and or maybe 80. And yeah, like Dave is like the person I aspire to be. When I'm 80, I want to be out wheeling my truck and like leading trails and doing all the stuff that he does. So anyway, so he kind of showed everybody the trails, showed everybody the ropes. It's really kind of a much, much, much smaller Easter Jeep Safari. So Easter Jeep Safari, registers like a couple of thousand, drivers, and then, like another couple of thousand people just show up, and so, our intention was never to get that big. So for years, our event was maybe 100 trucks. Now it's grown to about 200 trucks, or maybe a little bit more than that. But it's still obviously nowhere near, the size of Easter Jeep Safari. But we run the same trails for the most part. All the trails in and around Moab. We run a trail called the Kokopelli, which starts actually on the western edge of Colorado, and then we take trails all the way into Moab, which is kind of 3 days of wheeling, so two overnights, and that's a super popular trail. When we open up registration, we're registering people starting next week, and then a few weeks later we will do trail selection, and when we open up trail selection, the Kokopelli will probably fill up, within like 10 minutes. It's just, everybody wants to run that trail, and it's super cool, super scenic, not crazy hard. There is one section at the end of it called the Rose Garden Hill that is a pretty serious descent, and I think we're maybe not going to run Rose Garden Hill this year because it's kind of a weird addition to the trail where most of the trail is pretty mellow, and then you've got like this one crazy hard thing at the end. So I think maybe we're going to skip the Rose Garden Hill this year for the runs.
Nice. That's awesome. That I had no idea that you could do different kind of trail selection. So that's pretty cool. So you can kind of plan out your whole trip beforehand as a participant. If you have somebody who is not that experienced, versus it sounds like there's a variety of terrain there. You can go from mild to wild in Moab, I would imagine. So how do they, what kind of options do they have? How do they prepare to kind of know what to get on?
Yeah, we've got, I don't exactly know what the exact number is. I guess somewhere around 15 or 18 trail options for people to run, and they're rated on a 1 to 10 scale. I don't think we actually have any trails that are rated 1. We've got a couple of trails that are rated 2, and you can do those in a stock truck, 4-wheel drive vehicle, that you just drove off the lot. It'll do fine on those trails. Then we've got probably 4 trails that are rated a 4, where it's nice to have a little bit of a lift and maybe slightly bigger tires, and then we go. I think our highest rated trail is a 9. That's Pritchett Canyon. That's not quite buggy grade. I mean, I've driven my 80 on Pritchett Canyon, but it's that's a challenge. And I definitely use my winch a little bit that day as well. So so we've got fun for anybody who comes out. If you're an experienced driver with a really built truck, but you've never been on the Moab trails, you don't have to start on a beginner trail. You can go out and wheel some stuff that'll really challenge you. On the other hand, if you're just getting into it and you've got a truck that you intend to lift, you intend to get sliders and all that kind of stuff, but you just want to come out and run some trails, we've got ones that you're not going to damage your truck on unless you do something really stupid. We had one guy a couple of years ago. We had one guy who drove his 200 series through a giant puddle and managed to hydrolock his engine. And it just sucked water into the intake and killed his truck, and it ended up having to get towed back into Moab. So you can do stupid things on any trail, because he was on a fairly easy trail. But yeah, there's lots of options. There's kind of more options in the harder category, and I mean, that's what kind of keeps everybody coming back, is kind of the challenge of going and doing some fun stuff.
Nice. That's awesome. I know Doug. I've wheeled with Doug from Well Sorted,
Uh-huh.
and at Solid Axle Summit. I know he's been a trail leader for you guys, and I know that he really enjoys going out and kind of leading some of the trails. How do you go about finding volunteers? Is it hard to find people to want to take others out, or is everybody kind of jumping and there's always not enough spots for people to help out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely finding trail leaders is one of the harder things about planning the event. Because I mean, there's things like we use the Old Spanish Trail Arena as our headquarters, right? We sign a contract with them, we pay them a bunch of money, all that kind of stuff. But we have a great relationship with them. With trail leaders, you're looking for somebody who knows the trails, has maybe led trails before and kind of knows how to keep a group together and keep everybody moving, but everybody having a fun day. And so, a lot of folks from Rising Sun and a lot of folks from Wasatch jump in to lead trails, and certainly some other guys from other clubs. I know a couple of folks from the Book Cliff Cruisers coming out this year to help out as well. And we actually do some things to kind of try to nurture, future trail leaders. As a club, Rising Sun, we put on trainings every spring with a gentleman named Bill Burke, who operates out of Grand Junction. He is a master off-road trainer, and honestly just a great guy, one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. And but he knows more than he's forgotten more than like you and I will ever know. He was a master rigger, I think, in the Army, and so he knows how to extract like tanks out of ditches and stuff. So we'll have a weekend where maybe we go out and like we do recovery skills, and then we have another weekend where we go out and do leadership skills on the trail. Like, you're in this situation, this guy's over here, he's teetering on the edge. How are you going to take control of that situation? Recover that vehicle and keep everybody moving and everybody having a good time. Because in a situation you might have 8 different people who've got different ideas on how to take care of that. You need to have some knowledge of how to take care of it, but you also should listen to what other people have to say. But at some point, somebody has to, to lead that recovery, as well as, lead the trail. We teach spotting skills, and then we'll also go out to Moab with some of our newer guys, and we'll go pre-run trails. And, so we'll go out for a weekend and we'll run 2 trails a day. And, we'll take John, who's, you know, been out to Moab before but has never led a trail, and we're like, okay, John, you're leading Metal Masher. We're all right behind you, and so, you know, he leads a trail that maybe he's run once before, but he's leading a bunch of guys that he knows and that are all friends and that are all super capable. So we you know, we get out there and you know, give them the experience they need so they can actually do it for real when Cruise Moab comes. So we do try to kind of keep you know, nurturing, you know, future trail leaders so that, you know, when somebody says, hey, I can't come this year, we've got somebody who can step in, you know, and lead that trail.
That's really awesome. I was, you know, one of the questions I was thinking of talking with you about is, you know, the Seattle Cruiserheads are a very informal group. We're not TLCA affiliated right now. I'd love to get the group in that arena. And when you were telling me that this is a club event that you guys are putting on, and it's the scale that it is, it kind of blows my mind when I think of, you know, all the guys that, you know, I like to go hang out with and kick tires with, organizing something on the scale that you are. So it makes a lot of sense after hearing what you just did of, you know, in terms of developing future trail leaders, of getting people really involved in the event and getting that buy-in. So that's, you know, I can already tell, you know, everybody's really passionate about this event, and I know why, you know, without, you know, really even going myself at this point.
Yeah, you know, I will say, you know, I mean, like if you and your buddies got together and said, hey, we want to put on an event on some super cool local trail. I mean, we didn't start with, you know, the giant event that we've got. You know, we started like going like, hey, come out to Moab and, you know, wheel with us. And, you know, 50 people showed up, and, you know, and they booked a place to have a dinner and had a little bit of a raffle and had a great time. And then, you know, then you do it again the next year and it gets a little bit bigger, and then you add some stuff. So, you know, I mean, it's kind of hard to compare an event that's been going on for 25 years. You know, we didn't start where we are. Rising Sun these days has 90 members, 90 paid members. It's a really big club. I mean, there's a lot of people in Colorado who really like their Toyota 4-wheel drive trucks. And so, you know, we've got a pretty robust club. But yeah, I mean, you know, anybody can, and I encourage anybody to, you know, to start an event, you know, I mean, you know, and maybe you want to keep it small, maybe you want to grow it, you know, I mean, we've kind of chosen that, you know, we don't want to turn into another Easter Jeep Safari, but, you know, it's also fun to have a couple hundred trucks show up, and, you know, maybe that's 450 people. And, you know, that seems like a pretty fun size.
Yeah. As you guys are approaching kind of like the conversations around how to make it bigger or better, you know, what are some of the things that you guys are trying to do in the future, kind of how you're trying to continue to build the event without just adding the participant group that, you know, would build it into an Easter Jeep Safari?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I'll tell you, you know, I'm not entirely sure I know what the future holds. Moab has really grown as like a destination. When I started going out to Moab, you know, a little over 20 years ago, it was a sleepy little town with a couple of, you know, one-story motels and, you know, a couple of pizza joints and, you know, not much else, you know, and people would come out for mountain biking and, you know, maybe some climbers, and then the 4-wheel drive guys would come out. And Moab has turned into this like major destination. Just in the last like 5 years, there's all these giant hotels that have like been built. So, I mean, the challenge now is, because Moab has become such a destination, is, you know, how do we have an event there, you know, and, you know, keep all the locals happy, keep Grand County happy, you know, kind of abide by all the regulations. You know, we're regulated. Most of our trails are run on BLM land, Bureau of Land Management. Some of the trails will also cross over into state of Utah trust lands. And then we also run a couple of trails in national parks. And so, you know, we need to keep those agencies happy with how we're putting on the event, and, you know, are we respectful of the areas that, you know, that we're venturing into. So, so that's been a big focus of ours, especially in the last 5 years, is making sure that we're complying with all those things, because, you know, we don't want, you know, the city of Moab or Grand County to say, you know, hey, you guys are not welcome back. That has actually happened to an event that, that was a side-by-side event in the Moab area. and they essentially, were told, they were denied a renewal of their permit. But I mean, I think Cruise Moab has a very good reputation and a very good relationship with all those licensing entities. And we just want to keep it that way. So we also every leader has a spill kit on board. So if somebody breaks their junk on the trail and there's brake fluid or oil or power steering fluid or whatever, we're cleaning that up, and so we're not leaving a trace. We for years we carried satellite radios with us on every trail, so that if we were in a really remote spot and somebody got injured, we could call on a satellite radio. And more recently, we've been using the Garmin InReach devices for that instead of the satellite radios. We think about a lot of stuff, and sometimes I think we overthink it. But we start in August planning the next year's event, which happens in late April. So we put a lot of thought against making sure that every trail is safe, every trail has what they need to get everybody out at the end of the day. And and occasionally we'll have a truck break so bad on the trail that we have to leave it, and then then we'll send a team back in that night and fix the truck on the trail, or if we have to the next morning, or maybe we drag the truck out and then somebody with a trailer meets them at the trailhead, and we get them back to camp. So that honoring the trail and protecting the land and everything has been a big focus of ours, really from the start, but especially in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I was going to say that, it's a slippery, or it's a not necessarily slippery slope, but as one of the concerns that a lot of us four-wheel drive enthusiasts have is just, the loss of access to some of these areas where we're able to drive currently. And, I think I didn't realize that there were so many different land management groups that you're all trying to make sure that the permits are in line for each of those, or the group sizes could be different between one agency and another for an organization. So that's impressive that you're able to kind of keep all of those people happy, and manage the stewardship piece while you're still able to keep participants happy. And it's a lot of people to try and manage expectations for, I would imagine.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you a really funny story about the kind of changing access. There was a trail that we used to run called Onion Creek, and it's over, it's kind of northeast of Moab, and the trail, part of the trail actually went along the creek. You actually were driving in the creek, kind of up the creek, and it was just not a very deep creek, and it was kind of clear water with like a stone bottom. And it, it was really fun, really scenic, great for photos and all that kind of stuff. And they decided, the BLM decided that they were going to close down this trail. They were to motorized access. And we had a permit with the BLM that said, here are all the trails that we were allowed to run. And so we said, hey, we've heard Onion Creek is closing. And they said, oh, well, you guys are allowed to run Onion Creek, even though it's closing to everybody else. You guys are allowed to run it because your permit says you can run it. And then when you guys renew your permit in like another 3 years, you will no longer be able to run it. But until that time, you guys can run Onion Creek. So we went out and, kind of pre-ran Onion Creek. So we remembered exactly where the trail went, how it went. And we had a group go out, I think on like Thursday, and run it. And then we had another group that went out on Saturday of the event, which is always kind of the last day that we run trails. And it was led by my buddy Chris. And so Chris is leading this group, and like these guys, like these, kind of smelly hippies, like, ran down the hill, jumped out in front of his truck in the middle of the creek, and they're like, you're not allowed here, no motorized access. And he's like, hold on a second. He like reached over in his glove box and like pulled out the BLM permit and showed them the BLM permit that said, actually we are allowed to run this trail. And so then they sheepishly like went away. And, I think as they were walking away, like looking back over their shoulder, like, you still shouldn't be on this trail. And honestly, I think it was just the optics. It was like the optics of driving a truck down a creek just doesn't look good. I mean, it was completely, we weren't damaging anything. We went very slow. And, but, be that as it may, it was a fun trail while it lasted. But we definitely we definitely are very aware of, land use rights and, some of the groups that are trying to close trails, because it's a fight to retain motorized access. I mean, some of these groups don't even want mountain bikes to be in there. It's like, the only way you can go in there is by foot. And, I mean, there are some guys that come out, with their trucks that, just don't have the ability to go out there and hike or ride a mountain bike. And, motorized access is their connection to the outdoors. So, we very much support, land use. All the funds from our raffle that we do, the big raffle dinner on Friday nights, all the funds from our raffle dinner get donated to various land use causes. So, United Four Wheel Drive Coalition, Blue Ribbon, actually in several of the organizations in and around Moab we support as well as we'll donate to like the sheriff department and the Moab Search and Rescue and some of the other agencies that have kind of supported us over the years.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've talked. You've given me little tidbits of some of the adventurous times out on the trail at the event. Are there any stories that you can share of carnage with trucks that was hopefully happier endings, but anything along those lines of adventurous stories you can share?
I mean, there's always carnage. There's always Hell's Revenge has you probably have heard these the top there's these hot tubs that are kind of like really deep holes that are, and they're all slick rock. It's not there's some trails you go on and like the trail changes every time you go because rocks have moved and dirt has moved or somebody's like spun their tires and dug out. I mean, these don't change at all. They're just slick rock. So I mean, it's but you go down and then you kind of drive across and then you go up. And there's a few different hot tubs, and there's one of them that is by far the hardest of them. And honestly, it's kind of buggy grade. And so, we'll get some guys who've got 37s and, they're locked front and rear and, maybe they got a big V8 in there and they're like, hey, we're going to go down. And, they might end up, flipping on their lid and then you got to, roll them back over and stuff. I mean, honestly, we in the 25 years, I think we've only had a couple of serious injuries where they actually had to come and like helicopter somebody out. And one year that happened on White Knuckle Hill, which is on Behind the Rocks, which is actually the original trail in Moab, like the original 4-wheel drive trail Behind the Rocks. Pretty tough trail, really fun trail. But there's this obstacle there called White Knuckle that you cannot bypass. You have to go down, and it's just like a straight down drop. And there was a gal driving a truck, and she hit the gas instead of hitting the brake, and kind of went off the edge and much too quickly. And I mean she had a full recovery, but that was touch and go for a little bit. We had another guy on a trail called Steel Bender who. How sometimes if a truck gets tippy, some guys will like jump on the side of that on the sliders and hold onto the truck. Yeah, you really should not do that. That's really dangerous. There's many other ways to secure the truck that are not dangerous to life and limb. And so he fell off the truck, hit his head, and kind of went into convulsions and had to be helicoptered out. And he ended up being just fine. I mean, he's still in good shape these days, but I mean, he had several nights in the hospital, due to that. So, but honestly, most of the time, it's, you collect dents and scratches along the way. And, those are kind of the trophies of, people will look at your rig and go like, yeah, you wheeled that truck, right? I can tell,
Yeah, I'd keep it very, very not nice looking for a reason, so I don't wince when you catch a little trail damage. Well, I was curious with some of the kind of the trail experiences. I think pretty sure like everybody has first aid kits. Do you guys have the drivers have training? It sounds like you guys have satellite communication to kind of get help when needed and stuff like that. Is there anything for participants who are coming out, like things that you recommend for them to know, or ways to prep the rigs before they get there?
We do have vehicle requirements that are posted on cruisemoab.com. So, every every rig has a first aid kit. Every rig has a fire extinguisher. We make sure the rigs are not, leaking oil or coolant. They've got, a coolant recovery reservoir. The batteries tied down. Kind of, we do a vehicle inspection with every vehicle before they're allowed to get on the trail. Um, and a lot of times we've asked in the past, is anybody who's coming out at EMT or have medical training and that sort of thing, and so it's good to know who those folks are. We don't have somebody who's fully trained up with those skills on every trail, but a lot of times we'll have somebody at the event who has some of those skills. And the other thing is communication. When we first started running the event, it was a small event, and we would say, you should really get a CB, but if you don't have one, it's not that big of a deal. And then, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, we were like, we got to make CBs required, because we'd be on some trail and we'd have some guy who would get to a turn and not know which way everybody had gone because the last guy didn't wait for him. So then he'd go right when everybody else had gone left. And then 15 minutes later, we're like, what happened to Jim? And, and we'd be on the radio, and Jim didn't have a radio. And so then we'd have to have somebody go back up the trail and kind of figure out where he probably turned off of, and, drive like hell to catch up with him and try to get him to rejoin the group. So, we made radio communications a requirement, about 15 years ago. And then one of the new things this year is we have moved away from CB radios. We're actually now just using FRS radios, the little handheld radios. I've actually got one. I just actually bought this one. I've got one right here. It's just a little handheld guy. But a lot of them are actually smaller than this. They just have a little stubby antenna, it's about that long. And so you don't have to have a license to operate this, just like CB. But the nice thing is, with CB radio, a lot of times guys are installing their dash, and then they're wiring, and they're installing, an antenna. And in this case, one of these little handheld units works just as well as a CB radio. So, and you can get them for inexpensive, less than $100 on Amazon. You can get a 2-pack of Midlands for like $80, and so that's a pretty inexpensive way to have communications in your vehicle.
I like that you just saved me a weekend from like trying to install something in my truck by giving me an option that I can toss to somebody else to be like, oh, you don't have one here. I think that's the beauty of those, really, is just how quick and easy they can be for simple communication, which you don't realize until, like you said, like in December, we do this Christmas tree event where we go kind of up in the mountains and cut Christmas trees down in Seattle. And we were all heading back after we kind of hung out for a while, and there's a turn in the road, and about 15 years ago, the road washed out and you could drive for maybe 45 minutes down this road until the washout. And one of the guys, we were all like honking our horns, but he didn't have a radio. But his, navigation was telling him go this way, because that was the fastest route. So thankfully, I think even that there just convinced him at the time. He's like, yeah, I really need to get some kind of radio thing going.
Yeah. Well, and Rising Sun, maybe 15 years ago, 12 years ago, a bunch of us got licensed for ham. And so, like our local club, guys will join, and then they'll be like, okay, what's all this ham about? Like, I'll be sitting in my truck and thinking that nobody's talking, and then I'll look over and see a bunch of guys like just chattering away and realize that all the good conversations on the ham. And so, for the Colorado runs, we're pretty much on ham, but for Cruise Moab, we use the FRS radios, and then we kind of support it with ham, where possible. A lot of the guys coming in from other clubs don't necessarily have ham radios and don't necessarily want to go through the effort of getting a ham license, because you have to take a test and you have to pay some money to get licensed. So there's some effort that's involved there, which is completely worth it, because ham radio is it's definitely better than anything else out there. You can talk point to point, over simplex like 30 miles and have a crystal clear conversation. Whereas with the CB, sometimes you were struggling to get a mile.
Yeah, in my truck, I have a CB right now, and I'm looking at trying to start to do the studying for the ham test. and trying to get a bunch of people within our area. It's kind of divided. It's like, there's still people on CB talking about, GMRS, and then there's people on ham, and it's trying to get everybody on the same page is a little challenging. So I like that for your event. You just said, this is what we're doing. Just, make sure you have the right stuff. With, you talked a little bit about keeping everybody happy with the event in the area and the locals. Are there any other challenges with putting on an event? It seems like, the organization of getting all the pieces moving. I know that you guys have had years and years of experience kind of putting it together, but are there any other challenges with an event of this scale?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of logistics. One of the things that we are really glad that we are a Tlca chapter is we get our insurance, event insurance through Tlca. For an event of our size, that it's a motorized recreation event. So we're like lumped in with racing events and all that kind of stuff. Anything in a vehicle kind of gets lumped into, a motor vehicle event. And, just going out and getting insurance on our own would be cost prohibitive, for us just to be able to do it. But because we do it through Tlca has a policy that covers all the chapters, and then we pay some money to get, insurance certificates to cover our event. So it's not free, but it's affordable. We're dealing with multiple different agencies and making sure that we're meeting all the requirements. We've got a guy on our committee who, that's his job, is he's like the permits chief. We've got another guy who, really he's like our chef. He's the guy who makes sure that we feed everybody on Friday night, and not only including the carnivores, but we make sure we have a vegetarian option. And we have kids meals as well. So there's a lot of logistics with that. We've got we try to have cool swag. We try to have cool event T-shirts. So and all the rest of the stuff. So there's the coordination of that. And one of the things that we're dealing with in the U.S. right now is kind of all these shortages of things because of supply chain issues because of COVID. And right now, if you want to order T-shirts, the getting a T-shirt in a halfway decent color that somebody might actually want to wear, you might have to wait a couple of months to get those. So we're looking at that right now, going like, how soon can we order these T-shirts so that we actually have them for the April event? Because kind of sucks to show up at the event and not get a T-shirt.
Hot pink for everybody. Hot pink.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, those are in plentiful supply.
That's funny. That I wouldn't have thought of. Some of the constraints. And since you brought that up, it's funny, there's a guy in our little Land Cruiser group who's looking for a rebuild kit for a split case for his 62. So if anybody knows where we can find one, he's been calling everybody, and I guess they're just kind of sold out. But yeah, I hadn't thought about even just, the swag items and putting an event together, how that might be challenging with the current state of the world and whatnot.
It's a ton of logistics. We've got a couple of guys who are kind of the sponsor / vendor liaisons. So they're calling people like Tor and saying, hey, are you coming out? Do you want to exhibit on the vendor night? Do you want to set up like a booth or have a table or bring some trucks? Because some exhibitors are super jazzed about that. Some exhibitors are like, you know what, this is my vacation, so I'm not going to do that, but I'll contribute a cool item to the raffle. But otherwise, I'm gonna run trails and sit around the campfire. And then other vendors are like, super jazzed to show off all the cool stuff that they sell and make. So it just kind of varies. So yeah, there's it's just a lot. And it would be, if it was one or two people, it would be a full-time job. We've got a committee with like 13 people on it, and everybody kind of carries their weight. So we divide and conquer.
Nice. Who's doing the social for you guys? Because some of the posts that they had one with Matthew McConaughey from Dazed and Confused, and that was hilarious. I laughed so hard about that. Are you going to Cruise Moab? Be a lot cooler if you did. That whole line, that was hilarious.
Yeah, that's a really good friend of mine named Andy Jordan, who is on our committee, And yeah, he and I trade memes all the time. He's got a great sense of humor, and so he's been doing a killer job of that.
Props to him. That made me laugh pretty hard. Well, nice. If people, I know you got registration coming up. If people are interested in trying to get in, what does the process look like for them? How do they get involved?
Yeah, yeah. So the thing I would say is cruisemoab.com is our website. I'd recommend, if you're interested, go to cruisemoab.com and, check out the trails, check out the trail ratings, check out vehicle requirements, read up through some stuff. And TLCA membership is required to come to Cruise Moab because we are a TLCA sanctioned event. And so if you're not a TLCA member, which you should already be a TLCA member, but if you're not, go to TLCA and sign up. You can do so right online. There is an option for $25 to do an online only membership. You get the magazines in a downloadable PDF form, so you can read them on your iPad or whatever. For $35, you can, as a U.S. resident anyway, you can for $10 more, you actually get the printed Toyota Trails magazine, which I think is well worth the extra $10. So maybe go ahead and join, in advance. And then on Tuesday, February 1st, we are opening registration for the event at noon Mountain Time, because Colorado and Utah are in Mountain Time. So we'll announce it in Mountain Time, but that'd be 11 o'clock your time. I don't know. I've heard from a lot of people that they're pretty excited about coming out to the 25th event. In some years past, we've sold out, kind of all of our allotted registration slots, in a couple of days. So I think if you're thinking about it, this is not something to sit on and hope like the week before you can register, because it'll be long since closed by that. It may be closed by the weekend next week. So but yeah, we're opening up on the 1st, and we'll have a bunch of folks from Rising Sun and a bunch of folks from Wasatch, and then we usually get a big contingent from California that comes out, guys from Texas, guys from the Midwest. We have folks coming in from Oklahoma usually, and then we have folks from all over, and some of them are regulars. We've got a guy in Tennessee who's a good friend of mine who comes out almost every year, and he's a super great guy, and we're a long way from Tennessee, but he just loves the event, so he wants to come out and wheel those trails out there. So yeah, and if you've never been to Moab before, this is actually a great way to come out and kind of get your feet wet, because I'm sure you've talked about this. The worst thing to do is go out the trail by yourself. Go out with at least a buddy, go out with several buddies, because if your truck breaks or you get stuck and you just need a little tug, you've got somebody there who can strap you, and then you can keep moving. You're going to have experienced trail guides and gunners on every trail who are going to help you get through. They're going to spot you down the hard obstacles, when needed. And you get a real taste for what it's like in, what I think is one of the prettiest places on earth. And I really connect to the Utah desert. And every time I go out there, I think, what do I need to do to live here? But maybe someday.
Yeah, I can totally resonate. I think for me, a lot of my connection with outdoors started younger. I was in the Boy Scouts, and it's funny. I was thinking earlier in the conversation, there was a point we were talking about land access, and I remember standing like backpacking in to a spot in Moab outside of Canyonlands with a buddy of mine, and standing on top of this bluff and looking down, and I could see all the roads down there, the trails. And I remember seeing trucks, and I was like, I don't know why you would ever want to drive someplace you could walk. And he still I'm like super into the car thing now. And now he's like, yeah, you remember that one time you said this? So how do you feel about that now? And I was like, well, I don't know. It's a different type of adventuring. So, I think the way you described that first experience of Moab would be something that would really resonate with a lot of people, because there's times where I'm sure you've been out before maybe, and you're like, oh, I haven't done this trail before, and maybe you've heard it's cool, but you haven't researched the lines, and you get there and you're like, oh God, I got in and over my head pretty quickly. So I think going with people who are experienced, they kind of know what to expect. They know how to spot up the different line based on whatever wheelbase you're in. I mean, that's the kind of thing that, to have a really good experience for a first time, that would be what I think everybody should take away from this conversation is that, you're not only getting a food truck with barbecue coming down and people who are super passionate about the event, but, you're going to have a good time pretty much guaranteed, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. And you're absolutely right. When you're going on some of these trails, you look at them and you might go, "Oh my God, people actually drive that," and and then pretty quick you find yourself driving it yourself and actually feeling pretty confident about it. Because maybe you've seen a couple of trucks just like yours, same wheelbase, same model of truck that have just gone right up it. Typically, folks that are brand new, we'll try to put them in the line, either right behind the leader or maybe right behind somebody who's got a truck exactly like theirs, that's, so they, because, your 80 series might take a different line than the guy in the 40 series. And so, if you're new to it or new to Moab, it can be very helpful to watch what the guy did, in front of you and either mimic his line or maybe alter it a little bit. Maybe you're like, if I go just a little bit to the right, I think I could probably even spank that a little bit better, So yeah, it's definitely a good event for coming out, whether you're, an old hand or whether you're kind of new to the hobby.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you and everybody else who's kind of checking this out, learning about the event, and for you investing the time to share. It sounds like you guys have put a lot of work into this, and these are the kinds of things that I think the community, if they're not saying it, I'm sure you're hearing it from them. But, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to create events like this and make sure and talk about it and get people out there. I think that's one of the best parts about the Land Cruiser community as a whole that I've experienced is just how open people have been and how supportive that they've been through this whole process. So this is just another example of how great it is to be part of the community, is to hear about events like yours. I did have a question. I think this is the last little bit question here. Who can go to Cruise Moab? Do you just, can I show up in a Cutlass?
So I mean, we actually we tell everybody it's a Toyota event. I mean, all of our swag has FJ40s and 80s and 55s and 60s on. I mean, it's pretty clear that it's a Toyota event. But that said, like if your buddy with the Jeep Wrangler wants to register and come out and run trails with you, he can register. It's public land, and we've had some guys who've done that in years past. I will say not many, and you need to be ready to kind of get some ribbing from your buddy's friends who all will tell you that sell that junk and buy yourself something real. But yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, it's not very often that we'll get somebody who's driving something, other than a Toyota 4-wheel drive. But we do get, we've had a few guys show up with FJ25s, which is, really old vehicles. They take them on some pretty mild trails because, they're kind of trying to protect them. They've probably done a lot of restoration work on them. Lots of 40s, 60s, 62s, tons of 80s. At some point in the last 10 years, for years, 40s were the most popular vehicle out of Cruise Moab. And at some point in the last 10 years, 80s surpassed 40s. We get 4Runners, we get FJ Cruisers. We do get built 200 series. We actually see a pretty decent number of guys with their, $85,000 trucks, who've then invested, another 20 grand on lift kits and bumpers and sliders and, yeah. So, yeah, you don't have to have a 40 to show up. You can, you can bring any 4-wheel drive vehicle, but we prefer for it to be a Toyota.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I am excited. I'm hoping I can join at some point and take in the event. It sounds pretty darn amazing. I want to thank you again for the time and everybody for checking this out. If you haven't already, Cruise Moab, the event goes live noon Central Standard Time on February 1st.
Noon Mountain Standard Time on February
Mountain
1st.
Standard Time,
So,
sorry.
yeah. So, yeah. And hey, I've really enjoyed kind of watching some of your other Instagram live things and checking out your website with all the cool old literature and stuff. So, thanks for being part of the community. That, I think the Cruiser Cult is, kind of doing some really interesting things that, that nobody else has been doing for a while. So, it's really been cool following you guys. And you really should come to Cruise Moab this year. I got a beer waiting for you by the campfire.
All right, we'll see if I can sneak in with the TorFab crew. Maybe they'll let me do that. Yeah, we're trying to just celebrate the cruiser weirdness that everybody is seeming to be into. So we appreciate, as we've kind of continued to build what we're doing, how receptive everybody's been. So thanks for saying the nice words, and it makes it. This is a little bit of a side hustle, but it takes time away from other things. So it's nice to hear that. So thank you very much. And appreciate your time, everybody who watched. Thanks so much. And, get out there, get out to Cruise Moab, check out what it's all about. Otherwise, follow the Instagram. Maybe you'll see a whole bunch of stuff you missed out on, and that'll be a bummer. But bookmark those dates.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
Nice
Have a great
chatting with
night.
you. All right. Bye-bye.